Tonight, deep trouble in the Midwest, digging out of a wicked storm. And now the mercury is heading south. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, the president's healthcare overhaul hits a legal roadblock. A federal judge rules that requiring everyone to buy health insurance is unconstitutional. What moves John Boehner to tears? What doesn't?
That these kids have a shot at the American dream, like I did.
And a woman making history on the court. Steve Hartman's Assignment America.
From CBS News World Headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. It was fast and furious, the snowstorm that buried much of the Midwest in snow, and right behind it, a blast of Arctic air. The mercury will be plummeting all the way down to the deep south. This storm is blamed for at least 15 deaths, including 5 in traffic accidents. Airlines are getting back on schedule after 2,200 flights were delayed or canceled over the weekend. And repairs are set to begin at the Metrodome in Minneapolis after the roof gave way under heavy snow. The storm system has now moved from the Midwest to the Northeast into New England. Temperatures are taking a nosedive from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. National correspondent Dean Reynolds is in St. Joseph, Michigan. And Dean, this is not exactly a winter wonderland. This is pretty miserable.
It sure is. It sure is miserable on this street corner, Katie. The weather is not only wintry, it's positively painful. Howling 50-mile-an-hour winds that produced blizzards and whiteout conditions lashed the Great Lakes region today and drove temperatures into the 20s and teens deep into the south. It snowed in Louisville. The wind chill in Nashville will hit -5 tonight. In Raleigh, 0. In Atlanta, the real feel will be 2 above. And in Miami, yes, Miami, the wind chill is dropping to a frigid 25.
A space heater following me would be nice.
A lot of folks don't have heat, and so this kind of cold air is really difficult to cope with.
To the north in Indiana, traction is hard to come by.
You could see that truck that's trying to move it is just sliding on the ice.
Drifts as high as 6 feet have caused major traffic delays and put lives at risk.
I don't care what the freight is, I'll park it. My life or anybody else's life isn't worth the freight that's in that box.
On Sunday, motorists were stranded for 12 hours near Interstate 65 in Indiana when an accident boxed them in. A number of the vehicles they left behind were still there today.
Been on the road an hour and we've made about 8 miles.
Really?
Yeah.
So you're giving up?
We're giving up.
In Iowa, firefighters have been hampered by the elements.
The weather's not cooperating at all. Trying to keep water lines from freezing and water to the trucks.
In Illinois, hazardous is the word that comes to mind. It snowed all day in Cleveland, accumulating 7 inches. Schools were closed or delayed there and in the Pittsburgh area. Adding to the anxiety about this storm is the potential for lakeshore flooding. And over here at Lake Michigan, waves as high as 14 feet are now being recorded, and that's why that's a concern. Waves menaced Chicago's Lakeshore Drive this afternoon, and the plunging temperatures created another issue for travelers. What's the deal here? Was this ice?
The roads are ice. It's probably too cold for the salt to work.
Now, the frigid weather is expected to continue on into the midweek, and then on Thursday, a brand new storm is expected to land on the Midwest with both boots. Katie?
All right, Dean Reynolds. Dean, thanks very much. And by the way, get yourself a warmer hat.
I'll try.
All right, even though I sound like your mother. All right, thank you, Dean. Meanwhile, the Twin Cities were hit especially hard by this storm. Today, schools are closed, cars are still stuck in the snow, and the Vikings are playing a home game in Detroit. Here's Liz Collin of our Minneapolis station, WCCO.
It looked like a waterfall as snow poured onto the field from rips in the Metrodome roof on Sunday morning. It took 17 inches of snow in 18 hours to burst the Metrodome's bubble, leaving 3 gaping holes clearly visible from above. The inflatable dome just could not handle the weight.
1,360 tons of snow. That's more than 4 fully loaded 747 jumbo jets.
Sunday's was the worst of 4 collapses of the dome in 30 years, all caused by snow. Crews spent the weekend shoveling the roof and examining the damage both inside and outside. Across the Twin Cities of Minneapolis-St. Paul, the sheer volume of snow is also causing a problem for plow drivers. They're simply running out of places to put it. Snow piles like this are all over the city, this one at least 6 feet high, so it's not going to melt anytime soon. Cars are entombed curbside, and kids are being kept home from school and out of the below-zero wind chill. Meanwhile, the football game postponed due to the Metrodome collapse is back on tonight, but in Detroit. It should be well attended. Tickets to see the New York Giants play the Minnesota Vikings were free to fans who lined up for them in 12-degree temperatures. They were gone in just 90 minutes. Late word tonight, Brett Favre will not be playing in tonight's game, ending his game start streak at 297 games. That dates back to 1992. Meanwhile, repair crews here are hoping to have this all cleaned up in the next week in time for next week's game, Katie, but making things even more difficult. There's a few inches of snow in the forecast in the next couple of days.
Liz Collin of WCCO, our Minneapolis station. Liz, I understand it's only 5 degrees inside that stadium, so thank you very much for that report. And while the Midwest got socked with snow, heavy rain was a problem in the West. There were landslides in Seattle caused by 2 days of heavy rain. Flood warnings remain in effect. Several rivers are expected to crest tonight. And in Astoria, Oregon, a city block collapsed overnight after it was undermined by floodwaters. Now to the new health care law and an important court ruling. Opponents of the law have been challenging a key provision that will require every American who can afford health insurance to buy it. Today, those opponents found an ally in a federal judge. Here's our chief legal correspondent, Jan Crawford.
The White House hailed it as a once-in-a-generation reform.
We are done.
But in a 42-page ruling Monday, a federal judge in Virginia had another word for the landmark health care legislation: unconstitutional. Judge Henry Hudson said Congress went too far in requiring all Americans buy health insurance. The Constitution, he says, does not allow that kind of unchecked expansion of congressional power. The argument goes beyond health care, he said. It's about an individual's right to choose to participate.
It's about liberty.
The state of Virginia challenged the law, saying the federal government overstepped its power.
Even the president and Congress must act within the boundaries set by the Constitution.
The administration says the provision is critical for the law's success. For health reform measures to work, like insurance for people with pre-existing conditions, all Americans must have health insurance. It predicted it will win on appeal.
I think we have a good argument. I think the merits of the case are strong, and I think its constitutionality will be upheld.
Other courts have turned aside challenges from private citizens, but lawsuits by the states have been the most closely watched. The biggest challenge yet to be decided is in a federal court in Florida, where 20 states have sued the administration over the same issue, whether the federal government went beyond its power in health care reform. Arguments in that case are set for Thursday.
Now, 2 other federal courts have upheld the law, but these rulings really are just opening volleys, Katie. All these cases are headed for one place for the final showdown, the Supreme Court. Katie.
And Jan, what is the constitutional basis opponents are using to have an issue with this aspect of the law?
Well, the Constitution really gives Congress only limited powers, and one power is the authority to regulate interstate commerce. So in these cases, the states are arguing the government can't force you to participate in commerce by telling you have to buy insurance. They say a decision not to buy something doesn't really trigger Congress's power to regulate interstate commerce.
All right, to be continued, of course. Jan Crawford in Washington. Jan, thank you. President Obama returned to the White House briefing room today, this time without former President Clinton, but once again he called on House Democrats to support the tax deal he struck with Republicans. It cleared a procedural hurdle in the Senate today on a vote of 83 to 15, and passage there is expected in the next day or two. The bill includes an extension of all the Bush tax cuts and jobless benefits for the long-term unemployed. Of course, some big changes are coming to Capitol Hill in January. The Republicans will be back in control of the House. John Boehner will be in charge. It's his party, and as congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes reports, he'll cry if he wants to.
Making sure that these kids have a shot at the American dream, like I did, it's important.
Americans who watched 60 Minutes last night saw a side of their new speaker that's familiar to those on Capitol Hill.
And I think at the top of our list is providing for the safety and security of the American people.
He cries.
No, my nose is running.
No, it's not. What set you off that time?
The waterworks earned him some ribbing today.
We call him the weeper of the House. This guy has an emotional problem.
But in his 20 years in office, Republican John Boehner of Ohio has never been afraid to show his softer side.
When are we going to defeat him? I put myself through school, working every rotten job there was.
Crying in public derailed Ed Muskie's political aspirations in 1972 and haunted Pat Schroeder in 1987.
It was seen as a sign of weakness. You can't have someone who's going to go toe-to-toe with the Soviets if they cry while campaigning.
But today it's more acceptable, at least when men do it.
When men cry, we shrug it off, or we say, isn't it nice that he's able to show his sensitive emotional side? When women cry, it's, oops, there go those emotions again. They can't serve in top public office. They're not tough enough.
Outgoing Speaker Nancy Pelosi was asked about Boehner's crying jags last month. If I cry, it's about the personal loss of a friend or something like that, she retorted. But when it comes to politics, no, I don't cry. Boehner offered this explanation on 60 Minutes.
I'm comfortable in my own skin, and everybody who knows me knows that I get emotional about certain things.
The soon-to-be speaker insists that despite appearances, he has a thick skin. And after last night's appearance, Katie, he might need it.
All right, Nancy Cordes reporting from Capitol Hill. Thank you. And still ahead here on the CBS Evening News, a trailblazer on the hardwood in Steve Hartman's Assignment America. But up next, the growing toll of the Bernard Madoff swindle. Swindler Bernard Madoff sent word today through his lawyer he will not ask to be let out of prison to attend his son's funeral. The decision, he says, is out of consideration for the privacy of his son's wife and children. Mark Madoff committed suicide over the weekend, the latest casualty of his father's massive Ponzi scheme. Here's Anthony Mason.
Mark Madoff was said to have been despondent that he'd never find another job. It's a fear many former Madoff employees have had to face.
When you heard the news about Mark this weekend?
It was devastating.
Clive Brown, who drove for the Madoff family for 12 years, remembers Bernie's first words when he was hired.
Mr. Clive, you'll always have a job with us, as long as you don't steal.
But when Madoff's own Ponzi scheme collapsed, Brown didn't even get a severance.
No, we did not get not a dime.
It was just over.
Yeah, everything it was finito, nothing.
2 years later, he still hasn't found a job.
Did you think it would take you this long?
No, absolutely not.
Stop and Shop, A&P.
John Kelly has also faced 2 years of rejections and emails like this.
We'll need substantial convincing as to why someone who worked with that worst of scoundrels should be giving any consideration at all.
Do you feel like you've been blacklisted, in effect?
I think so.
Kelly earned $125,000 a year working on the trading desk, which was not connected to Madoff's investment scam. His family is now surviving on unemployment and food stamps.
So to go from something you felt so proud of to feel ashamed, even though you had nothing to do with it, it's very, very, very tough.
I'm happy to be away from New York.
Elaine Solomon moved to Florida to reinvent herself as a real estate agent. She'd been assistant to Bernie Madoff's brother, Peter.
It was a good place to work, and I wish it hadn't have been. I wouldn't have been so traumatized at the time.
2 years after the Madoff scandal broke, it's not just the family and investors who are unable to escape its shadow.
In reality, it's not part of my past. It's still part of me now because I haven't been able to find anything.
Right. You can't get past it.
I can't get past it.
Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
Coming up next, a cruise they will never forget for all the wrong reasons. It started out as a luxury cruise in the Middle East, but the tide quickly turned. 80-mile-an-hour winds stirred up 30-foot waves in the Mediterranean. On Royal Caribbean's Brilliance of the Seas, furniture and the passengers were tossed around. Nearly 1,000 Americans are on board. After leaving Rhodes on Friday, the ship rocked and rolled for more than a day. And as the captain slowed to enter the harbor in Alexandria, Egypt, the ship's stabilizers lost their effect, making things worse.
All hell broke loose. Everybody's beds and who was in their beds got thrown from side to side like a rag doll. People were screaming. I mean, it was just like Titanic, what you hear with the creaking and the thrashing of the boat and the screaming. I'll never forget it as long as I live.
The captain decided to bypass Alexandria, and the ship is now headed to Malta for repairs. Nearly 30 passengers were hurt, though none seriously. In other news, the Mona Lisa has fascinated art lovers for half a millennium. There's just something about that gaze. Well, now Italian researchers say they've discovered what appear to be letters painted into her eyes. They're too small to be seen by the naked eye, but are visible with a magnifying glass. In her right eye, what looks like the letters L and V, perhaps for the artist Leonardo da Vinci. In her left eye, what could be the letters C and E. That ought to keep the art history buffs busy for another 500 years. And coming up next, on this court, she rules. Steve Hartman's Assignment America.
Assignment America is sponsored by the makers of Alka-Seltzer Plus. All over relief from your worst cold symptoms.
And finally tonight, Granbury, Texas, named for a Civil War general, calls itself the town where Texas history lives. Well, some national history lives there too. Steve Hartman introduces you to the woman who made it in tonight's Assignment America.
The most dominant force on the Granbury, Texas girls high school basketball team is a 5'4", 130-pound senior.
Rebound!
Citizen.
Let it get on him!
73-year-old Lita Andrews started coaching in 1962 and hasn't missed a beat or a bad call since.
It's what makes me tick, I think. Dadgummit.
Any idea how many games you've coached?
Or how many yellow bus trips I've made? Oh my, a lot.
49 years worth. And although her hairstyles have changed dramatically, she says her coaching style has not.
I may have mellowed a little bit, but not much. And I don't think the naked eye could catch it how I've mellowed. Same old. My gosh. You didn't block out a soul. You just guarded oxygen here.
We certainly saw no signs of mellowing, or aging for that matter.
Do not let that girl pin you. You got a hold.
She can still block out with the best of them.
And I can come right here.
And shake loose a defender like dust from a mop.
At 73 years old, I think I can play point guard better than that.
So what's it like playing for her?
As much as I just want to.
The kids say they vacillate between wanting to strangle her and respecting her.
I know it's going to help me in life.
Whenever coach isn't yelling at you, that's when they don't care
I just
anymore.
don't care.
And she always yells at us, so obviously she still cares.
Plus, it's hard to complain about success. When we arrived, Lita Andrews had just won her 1,333rd game. That made her one away from becoming America's all-time winningest high school basketball coach. One away from becoming a legend. Lita went into the game like any other.
Block out and be mean and tough now.
Which is to say she coached like it was the most important game of her life.
She's pushing her everywhere.
Only difference, this time, it was. For one brief moment, Lita had nothing to fix, nothing to complain about, nothing to even say. She just savored the victory for all of about 12 minutes. Then refocused her team on the one thing she says matters more than winning.
But we got to get ready for this one on Thursday at 11 o'clock.
Winning the next one.
And you can expect many more wins in the future. I asked her if she planned to retire, and she said, hasn't even thought about it yet.
Dadgummit, I love that woman. Did you have so much fun talking to her?
So much fun. That story could have been 50 minutes long just using all the phrases that she has.
She's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for that, Steve.
Thank you.
And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thank you for watching. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Good night.